Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining. This is my very belated September wrap-up. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has come and joined me and started to watch my channel. I'm a brand new creator. I've only been doing this a few months. I've been having a wonderful time just making videos about the books that I love, and I never really expected anybody to start watching them, but I think I'm up to like 9 or 10 subscribers now. I got my first comment on a video, and it was somebody catching a reference to Stained, and it just warmed my heart that they got the reference and wanted to comment because they thought that that was really entertaining. So welcome to everybody who's been joining me. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend some time with me. So without further ado, let's get into my September wrap-up. So I did not get much reading done. Wow, my cat is just going crazy on my desk. I have a sit-stand desk and it's at its full height. She's thinking it's a jungle gym and it's kind of scaring me. Honey, can you maybe get down? Ooh, okay, we're gonna take a break. Come on. And we're back, okay. So I did not get much reading done in September. If you've been following my vlogs, you know it's because for the first time in 2.5 years, really since the pandemic started, I have had to go back into my office. And so I am right now on a 1 week on, 1 week off rotation. And so for September, I had my first full week of work in the office. I was so busy the whole time I was there. And then, you know, I was so tired, getting up earlier, working later than my normal time because it just is what happens when I work in the office, and it always has. And I was way more tired. I had so much more to do. I was stressed out, and I just didn't have the same time to read that I normally did. And I thought, okay, my second week will be better. It really wasn't any different. I was just as busy, and then I ended up having to cover 2 days for somebody else. So I did not get much reading done, and all of the books that I read were ebooks or audiobooks. And so I don't even have anything to like physically hold. So that's why I'm holding my little fox plushie, because I fidget and I need something in my hands. So this will be my determination on whether the book made me happy or that I did not like it. So I only had 3 books. This will probably be my shortest wrap up yet, but that's life, right? That's okay. So I'm just gonna get right into it. So my first book, I actually started it in August and I finished it in September, and that was Days of Distraction by Alexandra Chang. Now this is a story of a Chinese American, first generation American. Her parents were both from mainland China, and her navigating the world in her early 20s, and specifically her life in the tech industry in Silicon Valley. So there was the intersection of being a young woman, being in tech, being Chinese American, being first generation American, but having her parents be immigrants, and all of those things and her experiences in her day-to-day life, in deciding in her early 20s, what does she want to do with her life? Is she happy with what she's doing? She's in a relationship with a, I believe it was a high school sweetheart. They're still together, and he's white, and for the longest time she never had any issues with that. She never had any struggles with that. But as she experienced more and more of the adult world, the microaggressions, as a woman, as an Asian American woman, and she started being more aware of how people viewed her and her heritage and her culture. A lot of times, you know, the question of, where are you from? Well, I'm from San Francisco. No, but where are you really from? That was a theme that she explored, and it was kind of in like journal entries, except they weren't really written specifically as a journal, but that was sort of the style, the perspective. It was almost a little like stream of consciousness, where she would kind of bounce back and forth. An idea would pop into her head and she would kind of follow that thread. And then after a while, she started having stresses about her relationship, because she started to feel, to question her own identity, and the identity that she thought she had, is that really her identity? Is that who she wanted to be? The man she was with, did he respect her identity as, you know, Chinese, as a full American? You know, was there any lingering, even unconscious racism in him? Were they going to make it as a mixed couple? All of these things she explored, and her parents had been separated for years. And she ended up, as part of this novel, traveling to China to visit her dad, who had moved back there, and sort of exploring that part of her culture, that part of her identity. Did she fit in better in China than she did in America, even though she's American? And it was really interesting. I was really glad to hear the voice of a woman, an Asian American woman, and a woman in tech, because there were so many different facets in that intersection of all of those things that, you know, myself being a woman in tech, I face some of that intersectionality, but I don't have all of the, you know, similarities that others do if they are, you know, not American, not white. And, you know, I don't get the question of, oh, well, where are you from? And I don't get the question of, you know, do you speak your heritage native mother tongue? And seeing those tiny microaggressions and how they felt to the person experiencing them, I think was an incredibly valuable experience. So that being said, I would recommend the book. I gave it, what did I give it? I gave it 3 stars. I would say it's probably more like 3.5. I struggled with the style of the writing. Journal style is not really my favorite, but it's not the worst for me. What kind of held me back from really loving the book as a whole was the kind of stream of consciousness, where she would follow a thread, you know, a memory of her childhood, or a memory of her parents, or, you know, an essay that she was reading about something, and she would kind of branch off into that. And the style was completely intentional, and it was well executed, I felt. But it's not a style that I easily connect with, because my gerbil brain it has trouble with trying to keep a continuity, and when my attention is distracted in a book specifically, I can very easily lose the thread that I was following up till that point, and it can pull me out of the story. And I know for other people it can make it more immersive. So that is a fault of my own in how I perceive or how I enjoy a specific writing style, but it was not the fault of the book. It was not the fault of the author. What she was intending to do, I felt, was very, very well executed. The voice that it was portraying, I felt, was a very valuable thing for me to read and experience and have a better understanding of a world experience outside of myself, outside of my own. And for that, I really appreciated it. So I would say Days of Distraction, I would give 3.5 stars. And so I'm going to leave it on my Happy Fox. The next book that I read, The Devotion of Suspect X, which was the first book by Keigo Higashino, which was the Galileo, Professor Galileo, Detective Galileo kind of series. And this is the actual first book in the series. I read gerbil brain. It's just on that hamster wheel. It's just spinning. It's spinning and it's not going anywhere.
1 hour later.
Salvation of a Saint. Salvation of a Saint I liked. Devotion of Suspect X I loved. I gave this 4 stars. I was super impressed. It had a twist that I did not see coming. And the thing is, I expected a twist the whole time. I expected it, I could tell it was building to something, and it was, to me, it was so masterfully done what it was building to, that it it was like a house of mirrors. You thought you knew exactly where it was going. You were picking up these little subtle things that became more and more overt as the book went on. And you think, oh, I know where this is going. I know where this is going. And then boom, the last like chapter just out of nowhere flips you on your head. I cried. There was a line in it that it hit me so hard that I cried. Like, it's a mystery. It's like a murder mystery novel. How could it affect me that much? So I did really short, I don't really write long reviews on Goodreads, but I do try to jot down a few thoughts on most of the books. So I said, the mystery, figuring out why everything always felt a step off kilter, sympathy for the killer and the accomplice, and then the ending. Just blew my mind. So this is the quote that punched me in the gut, though. Sometimes all you had to do was exist to be someone's savior. I stopped I was literally walking, actually pacing back and forth because I was working from home that day, and I was waiting for, I think, a conference call to start, and so I had a few minutes, and so I was pacing. I literally stopped in my tracks and just held my breath and then started crying because, you know, for some people maybe it's a throwaway line, maybe it's super sappy, but if you've ever been that person that has either been on either side of that coin, either your existence has meant so much to someone else, even if you don't know how much you mean to them, the idea of my existing being so valuable to somebody else that it can save them or give them purpose for living is just, it's heartwarming. But then there's also the other side of the coin of, you know, I personally know that I have affection, deep affection for people, but it tends to be from a distance because I sometimes have a hard time letting somebody know how meaningful they are to me because it feels like they have closer friends, they have closer family than me, and so I feel like maybe I'm intruding, but they mean the world to me for whatever reason, you know, for different reasons. And I've lost a lot of people in my life that I don't think they've ever known how important they were to me. So that line it just hit really, really hard, and it hit in a beautiful way. I felt like for the first time, somebody outside of myself understood that feeling just in its essence, in its very core. And I loved it. And it was beautifully written. It was well devised. You knew from the beginning who did it and what happened. And then it's a matter of the killer trying to escape the cops and the cops trying to figure them out. And it was so well thought out. Fantastic mystery, plausible. You know, there was nothing so fantastical where you're like, yeah, that would never happen, so this book is dumb. I absolutely loved it. I would highly recommend Devotion of Suspect X by Keigo Higashino to anyone. Even if you're not into mysteries and thrillers and stuff, I thought this book was a fantastic mystery that so many people would enjoy. I think they're making a movie of it. I feel like when I was Googling it, I saw like movie posters and stuff. So I'll watch that when it comes out. I don't care if it's subtitled. I will watch that. You should go watch that. You should go read that. Go read that. Excellent book. Okay, so we're two down out of my 3. And you know what, actually? I'm not going to get to use my angry fox, so I should probably show you what she looks like. You probably already know. But this is my mood fox, and I put him on my desk when I'm, you know, depending on the day I'm having. So this is just my little cutie pie with his 3 tails. I love him. But I'm gonna turn him back because I really liked this last book. So my last book I actually listened to almost in its entirety in one day. And it was the day that my dad went into the hospital because of a blood clot, and I had a doctor's appointment I could not miss, and the hospital wouldn't even let my mom in, so she had to wait in the parking lot for hours and hours and hours. And she told me, go to your doctor's appointment. There's nothing you can do here. Even when she would be let in, like, they were making her wait until he was put into a room in the emergency room because the lobby was just packed with patients. They could not let anybody else in. She's like, even when I can go in, you can't. They can only have one visitor. She's like, so go relax, go read a book, go drive around aimlessly, whatever you want to do that'll calm you down, because I was kind of freaking out. So I drove around aimlessly, and I started this book, and that is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I gave this 4 stars. Neil Gaiman, this is the first work that I've ever read of his, but if I am not wildly mistaken, he has been a writer on Doctor Who, which is one of my like top 2 favorite shows of all time. Doctor Who is, I could talk about endlessly, and I absolutely love it. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Neil Gaiman wrote some of my absolute favorite episodes. And so I was excited to finally read something of his. And The Ocean at the End of the Lane, I didn't really even know what it was about. I knew that I had it on Libby. It became available like the day before, so I popped it in. How do I describe this book? It is the repressed memories that come to the surface again as a man in his 40s. I believe he has come home for the funeral of his father, and after the funeral he goes to see his old house where they used to live, but he ends up driving past his old house down the lane to a farm. At the very end of the lane there was a little farm, and there was a pond in the back behind the farmhouse, and he suddenly started remembering a childhood friend that he had known for a short time who lived there. And so he wanted to go see the friend again, and this old woman answered the door, and he, said, I used to play with Letty when I was a young boy of about 7, and she's like, oh, I remember you. So he's like, would you mind if I looked around? And she's like, take your time. And so he goes around to the back to the pond, and he sits at the pond, and then he starts to remember this wild adventure that he had when he was 7 that had been completely wiped from his mind. And it was this incredible fairy tale / sci-fi adventure that he was, as he was remembering it, he's like, am I remembering this right? This cannot be real. And it felt like a Doctor Who episode in that everything had rules and boundaries and a logical explanation that followed those rules and that boundary within that world. And so his friend was named Letty. She was 12, I think, and he was about 7. And he thought she was just a normal girl, and her mother and her grandmother were the only ones on the farm. And then he finds out they're basically, it never really says what they are, but they're fantastic. They're amazing. And he has this adventure where there's, okay, if you've seen Doctor Who, let me comment down below before I get to naming it, if you can tell me what this reminded me of. He goes out with Letty into the woods, and there's this creature there, and it's this big canvas, just this flat canvas that looks like it's just like the side of a tent kind of a thing, but you can tell it's alive, and it had, slits for eyes and a mouth, and it could speak, and it could, it could be stretched wide and thin, or it could flutter at the breeze, and it had a malevolence to it. I'm gonna give you 1, 2, 3. Moisturize me. If you know, you know. That's what it reminded me of. And so it was Letty's job to basically bind this malevolent creature so that it couldn't wreak any more havoc on the world around it. And within that set of rules, something happened that had been warned, this can't happen, or else this won't work. The thing happens, and it leads them on this longer adventure. It was supposed to just be a one-off thing, but it ended up spanning out, and he just sits there at this pond that his friend used to call the ocean, and he remembers this incredible adventure that he had, and he's struggling to remember, was any of this real? Nobody would believe me if I tried to tell them. Why haven't I been able to remember it? And so for most of the book, it's told from the perspective of the 7-year-old boy as he's experiencing it. And I gotta say, Neil Gaiman did an amazing job of telling a story from the perspective of a 7-year-old and not in an infuriating way. One of my least favorite, my most hated book tropes is protagonists doing something dumb simply so the plot can advance. There's no logical reason why that person, their age, their life experience would make such a dumb decision or so many dumb decisions, and it's specifically so that the plot can exist. And then you don't deserve to write a book. It's not worth it, in my opinion. Neil Gaiman wrote from the perspective of a 7-year-old, and as poor decisions were made, it made perfect sense because he's telling it from a 7-year-old's perspective. And when it's explained in the boy's own thoughts as a decision, as a crux, the crux of a moment comes, and he has to make a decision one way or another, or take an action or not take an action, he doesn't always make the right choice. And he talks through it in his head as a child, and you're like, yeah, if I was a 7-year-old facing that scenario, I would probably do the exact same thing. I'm not an adult. I have no massive life experience. I don't even have a wide range of fairy tales necessarily at this point to kind of guide me with those lessons and those tales of what to do in a fairy tale situation. And so the decisions, while a little frustrating, you kind of wish, no, don't do that. It makes sense, and it moves the story along in a natural way for such a fantastical story. And I just absolutely loved it. I loved being inside a Doctor Who episode while Neil Gaiman narrated it. It was amazing. And I also cried during that one because at the very beginning, a little animal is hurt, and I was not having a good day. I was stressed out. I was terrified of my dad being in the ER. And Neil Gaiman just has this at the beginning of the story, and I almost had to pull over. I was just bawling, and I was like, what the heck, Neil Gaiman? Why would you do this to me? But it ends up becoming quite a theme in the story, and it comes up at different parts in the story. It was an important life event for the child that he was writing, and I just thought he did so well at it. It was really, really incredible, and I cannot wait to read something else from Neil Gaiman. That's all I have for September. I started some other books in September, but I did not manage to finish them before the end of the month. So unfortunately, I do not have, a massive wrap up like so many people, and I love watching wrap ups from so many booktubers because they read so prolifically. And I love to get those little synopsis and impressions of so many different books. So I am sorry I don't have more for this month. I just did not have it in me. I didn't have the time. I was reading for I think like 2 months now, The Gradual. I finally gave up on that one. It was due back in Libby, I think tomorrow, and I'm still only like 50% of the way through. It just wasn't grabbing me. One of these days I'll finish it. So I was really hoping to have that for my wrap up, and I didn't, but you know what? I don't think it was worth it. I think it was putting me into a reading slump. So if you're like me and you start a book and you're like, I have to finish this book, if it's causing a reading slump, get rid of it. Just stop. Don't do that to yourself. Just because you aren't going to finish it in the moment doesn't mean you're never going to finish it. So give yourself some grace, and don't lose your love of reading just because you're reading a dragon. You're reading a dredgingly long book. So that's it. That's all I got. That's my advice for you. Read the books that make you happy. Read the books that make you mad, but in a good way. And apparently I've had a puppet on my hand this whole time. So I will see you, actually, I am planning another video for hopefully within the next few days. I need to get some of my stuff together and film it. But it is a sort of going into October video, and it's probably not what you think. So I'm gonna get going. Thank you again so much for joining me. Check out any of the books that I read that I talked about in this wrap up if any of them interest you. Ocean at the End of the Lane. Please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, be safe out there, and I will see you in my next video. That's my story. and I'm sticking to it.